audience.
Okay. Alrighty, welcome to our first live stream in technically a full calendar year. There's a bit of calendar madness behind that, but it's technically been a year since our last live stream. So just to introduce who's here this evening, or morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. There's obviously myself, Ethan, and the other half of MA Network, Lukas.
Hello.
Then we're joined by two very special guests. The first one being Elliott Mountford, the founder and managing director, of Ti²² Design, based in London in the United Kingdom. He's known for his work on Charlie XCX's The Charlie Live Tour, which is currently out, I believe, as well as work for the X Factor UK. Welcome, Elliott.
Hi, how you doing?
Then we're also joined by Christoff, who is the in-house programmer at Baxter Theatre Centre in Cape Town. He's also a freelance lighting designer and programmer, having done work for Corona Sunsets Festival down in South Africa, Ultra Resistance, and Rocking the Daisies. And lastly, he's my business partner. Welcome, Christoff.
How's it, guys?
Alrighty, so yeah, it's been a year. That's pretty hectic, to say the least. So maybe before we get into anything, Lukas and I should probably explain that. So I'll give my justification. I was in my last year of schooling, so that kind of just took over my life, and we just really didn't have time. And Lukas, you were also in university, or you're still in university?
Yeah, same thing basically. I'm in university, also working full time for it basically, other than the free time you have between the semesters. But in my free time, I mostly worked on my career the last year and really did a lot of stuff to improve all my skills, and got a little.
Yeah, you mentioned working your career, so I think that's the perfect segue into my first question for both of our guests. So let's start with Elliott. Elliott, how did you get started in lighting?
Oh, wow. It was probably a while ago, maybe like 5-6 years ago, that I kind of just thought I want to start like a career in like live events and stuff. And then I thought, well, I'm awful at acting, I'm awful at singing, so backstage is probably going to be what kind of I get into. And then I got an apprenticeship with a company in London. Then went freelance after 6 months, and then kind of not looked back. I was quite lucky enough to have a local company down here where I'm from in Essex, near London, kind of take me on, and I work on a lot of their projects with electronic dance music. And then kind of once you get known and once you start doing bits for everyone else, your work just picks up.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a bit about, besides what I mentioned, where your career has led you up to this point? What kind of like some of the big events you've done and that kind of stuff?
So I've done quite an interesting range of events. I think Charlie XCX, as you mentioned earlier, is probably one of my favourite artists to work with at the moment. Just so bold for lighting, so experimental. We do so much random stuff. So I really kind of enjoy working with her. But I've done quite a lot of programming before, and that's what my background is majority in. So for people like Dave, the rapper, which is a big one last year that I did. Lots of kind of, as you said, X Factor guests. Just a big mix match of everything. And obviously, you mentioned Christoff with Ultra Resistance. I did a bunch of Ultra Resistance as well. I think it was 2 years ago or a year ago or so.
It's around that time.
Yeah, I can't remember. So I just like to try and do a little bit of everything. And I think this year, before the whole coronavirus, I was going to try and do a lot more kind of EDM festival stuff, because a lot of my stuff's very kind of queued and time coded. And whereas I like the live aspect a little bit more. So I'm hoping to kind of, I see myself over the next, if not this summer, next summer, really pushing myself into like the electronic dance music festival scene.
Yeah. All right, so just before I move on to Christoff, I just want to mention, anyone watching, if you have any questions for either of our guests, feel free to drop them in the chat, and they'll answer them. And if you have any questions in general about MA, we're still definitely going to be talking about MA in general, so also drop those. So Christoff, how did you get started?
Well, I started doing about 4 years ago. I started doing more on the theater side of things, and then I had like one or two more live specific events lined up, but then I was offered a senior job at the theatre in Cape Town now, where I've been for almost exactly 2 years to this day. And yeah, it's been great, in-house programmer, but definitely looking to jump more into the live scene now, picking up some live scene gigs like I've been doing now with Daisies and Resistance and Corona Sunset, which is now not happening anymore.
Yeah, it's
But
got a bit
yeah,
of an awkward name as well. It would have been a bit awkward to
yeah,
have it happen now.
it was
So,
kind of on the verge of just happening, but
yeah.
yeah, attendance would have been really, really bad just given the name and everything.
So I think given the current situation in the world, we'll definitely come back to just general discussions about our careers and everything. But obviously, we're living through the first pandemic of the century. And I think we're in a unique situation right now where we can discuss how it's affected LDs all over the world. So starting in South Africa, both Christoff and I have been affected in the same way. We just today, South Africa went into their full 21-day lockdown, which obviously meant no events would happen. A week ago, we were put into a different situation where all events over 100 capacity were banned. So obviously, that's pretty much got rid of all events that were planned to happen. Elliott, how has it affected you?
Well, first of all, I kind of going back to January. Obviously, it was just a virus, and it was just a name. Like everyone was like, "Be careful of coronavirus." Like wash your hands. And then I went to Russia in February. Didn't really think much of it, and then as soon as it hit March, it seems to have blown up completely. Obviously, spreading everywhere. I think the first festival that I heard got cancelled was Ultra in Miami, which wasn't great. And then Tomorrowland Winter, and then
Yeah.
Coachella got postponed. And then I think it spread over here more for kind of gossip and the whole media side of it. And most of the UK festivals like Glastonbury got cancelled. I think Download's been cancelled. There's a few other ones that have been cancelled. And then they put us, I think it was Monday, they put us in 21 days lockdown as well. Where we're only allowed to go out once a day for exercise and like essentials and stuff, which isn't great, but then it gives you more chance kind of to work on like show files. I've been working on show files, learning depends, like just a bit of everything to chill out. But obviously every festival is kind of cancelled at the moment. I've lost quite a bit of work over the past 2 months from it, and then we don't know where it's going to go, do we?
That is the thing. I mean, looking from South Africa, we're in a bit of a stricter lockdown where we aren't actually allowed to leave our house for exercise or anything. The only reason you can leave your house is for food and seeing a doctor, that kind of stuff. So it's definitely affecting everyone differently. And I mean, as you mentioned, there's no guarantee in 3 weeks or in a month it's going to be gone. Lukas, what's happening in Germany? I haven't read much news out of Germany recently. Obviously, Pro Light and Sound was cancelled.
Yes, of course. Same
was
thing
a huge
with all of the events.
sadness.
Of course, yeah. I mean, all the different people that were gonna show their products off are also really in a different place now, and really looking on money now. I heard Robi is not doing any business anymore right now. They just froze all their money stuff. So that's the same situation basically. We also don't have the events anymore. We are told to stay at home, and yeah, that means the same thing, but the essence is also the same. So I'm for example using the situation to learn new stuff, try out stuff with the MA, figuring out MA3. I'm hoping for a great update at the beginning of April. So maybe this improves the free, that you can like start working with it actually, because right now a lot of missing features, a lot of bugs. You basically encounter them every like minutes.
It definitely,
but
the MA3 software is definitely looking very cool. Obviously it's just lacking a lot. I mean, Elliott, you recently did training on it as well?
Yeah. I did the first training session in the UK, which is kind of interesting actually, because we had a mix of people. And I really like it.
I also like all the concepts that you like for multi-instance fixtures and stuff, and also like just thinking about effects as just a selection of values that you can really more freely manipulate between. So that's really interesting.
definitely. I mean, just back to the whole coronavirus story is, and Lucas, you mentioned you taking the time to learn, and I think
Yes.
that's a very admirable thing to look at the entertainment industry as a whole, at how many have made their training. Obviously, MA already had free training available, but how many other console manufacturers, and I mean just manufacturers in general, very light, or at least quite a bit of stuff, have made their training and their resources completely free and available, so that you can take this time to learn. And it's a shitty situation to be in, to be like, oh, we're taking the time to learn, but it's the best use of our time right now.
Yeah, at least we are able to learn. I mean, could be worse, right?
Definitely could be. So we've got a question. Hi, can I import a MA2 macro / plugin to MA3 without issues? Macro? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
The syntax is different as well. So
Yeah, a lot
I
of
think it's
syntax
slightly
has
different, but
changed.
there's still similar things that you
Yeah.
can import,
But-
like variables and stuff, I believe.
But that's actually for the plugin part of the question. This maybe would be something that the project that I'm going to announce in this stream could fix. So
Okay,
the
so when we announce it,
intercompatibility thing between like MA2 and MA3 plugins. My idea
we
would
get
be a
into that in a
platform
bit.
that is able to use both
Yeah.
systems with the same command set, basically.
And then the other one is, when will there be an update on the Grand MA 3D software, meaning the engine? There probably won't be.
yeah,
What do you
because
guys think?
MA3 is out. MA2 is kind of just stability updates now. It's not really any feature
Yes.
updates happening. They won't do any improvements on it because they'll be focusing on MA3 software
Yeah.
primarily, just getting that actually show ready, which is still going to take a year and a half.
Yeah, so obviously, unless they find a catastrophic issue with MA3D, which I actually found a way to crash MA3D constantly, and I keep forgetting to report it. But unless it's a stability-related issue, they're not really going to be focusing on MA2 too much in terms of updating and adding stuff. Obviously, this is all speculation on our end. There's no guarantee that could happen, but that's what we're looking at. I mean, talking about MA3, even though the MA3 has now been out for a year, Elliott, you've been using, I mean, you own one firstly, and you've been using it on shows quite often. How are you enjoying the new hardware, and how are you enjoying it in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'll point out, I've been using it in mode 2.
Yeah.
I've not actually used mode 3 at all. I've obviously, apart from training, I actually prefer it to MA2 now.
Yeah.
I much prefer it, just because I think when they've really thought about where the buttons go, where the encoders are, like little things like the next and previous button next to the encoders, so you don't have to keep moving your hand, your right hand from the encoder down to the previous and next button like you would on MA2.
Yeah.
The screens are obviously more well laid out. I just prefer it as a whole, and the buttons for me really do
the
it.
buttons. So I had my first run on it recently, and it's a very steep learning curve, realizing where all the buttons are. They do after time make a lot more sense in terms of their placement. But yeah, I mean, once you get onto it, there is definitely a change. And I mean, Christoff, you had an MA3 at Baxter for what, 2 months, 3 months?
That was almost 4 months. I
Almost
mean,
4 months.
I've come to prefer running MA2 on a MA3 console than actually an MA2 console, just
Yeah.
for that extra screen real estate and having the letterbox windows down below for your executors and your attributes, giving you that just a little bit more space for your layouts and stuff like that. Actually,
Yeah.
quite nice, and I don't see an issue running the MA3 console in mode 2 if the MA3 software is going to take forever to actually get there.
So Lucas, you're on the flip side. You've obviously got. I mean, are you cool with me announcing it? Before I say anything?
Yeah, currently I'm having a Grand MA free command wing sitting here next to me, so that is what I have been fiddling around with the last days, and also with mode 3, of course, because you can't use the command wing in mode 2. I don't know. I mean, I'm really like I like to figure around with stuff, with new software, and just try it out. Like, I also think that MA3 will take a long time till it's at the point where you would like say, I'm rather using MA3 than MA2, because right now that's not it, basically. But I'm really looking forward to that moment. Because I think the workflows on MA3 will be much faster without macros, of course, than most of the workflows on MA2, even with macros are.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there's the other aspect of obviously MA Mode 3 is in its early stages. It's about the same as if you look back to when MA2 was released, how long people ran Mode 1 on MA2 hardware. And it's going to be like that for a while still. But definitely what I've played around with Mode 3 and what I've seen it capable of doing, it's definitely going to be very interesting. Because I see that like a lot of what the new features you could theoretically have done in MA2 with macros and complicated stuff, but you're in a much simpler point now. And just looking at questions in the chat, will there be a MA3 on PC version for the 3D renderer? So the 3D renderer is now built into the actual MA3 software. This allows you, if you're using an actual console, to have a 3D window on the console. And if you're in an on-PC version, you can have it also displaying as a window. I don't think they're making a standalone software.
Yeah, it also doesn't really make sense because the majority of the issues they have with the MA3D is people can't seem to get it working in terms of connecting it.
Yeah.
Now it being one software, it
Yeah.
just streamlines the whole thing. You don't have to worry about loopback interfaces or running two
Yeah.
computers, one for the 3D, one for the on
Obviously, I
PC.
mean, you could still, if you want to, obviously the console is
course,
limited in
yeah.
what hardware it has. If you want to use a really powerful PC to run the 3D renderer, you can still create a session and do it that way.
Yes, that's exactly how you could do it.
And you're kind of going to be forced to now because it has been publicly announced that they're not going to be creating like a WYSIWYG plugin again.
So you're gonna have to have some sort of
Yeah.
MA3 hardware to unlock
So Elliott, I
parameters
think
for a
you told me
third-party
about this.
visualizer.
Yeah. There's no plans to currently.
Yeah.
Whether that happens or not, I personally think with the way that they're going with Vectorworks and MVR and everything, they're gonna do something with Vectorworks. Whether that be with Vision or
Yeah.
something, they might make a plugin. But at the end of the day, it just depends where the industry goes in terms of when MA2 was released. WYSIWYG obviously was the industry standard, and
Yeah.
now there's so many more like Capture, Depends, there's everything. It would just be kind of wait and see game and see what they do. It'd be a bit annoying if there's no WYSIWYG driver. I'm not going to lie. But then same again if with Depends, as I'm saying, there's no driver for that either. So I guess we just sit back and wait and see what MA kind of come up with.
So I'm glad you mentioned Depends. I was just going to bring that up. Obviously, you've been talking about it a lot recently, and I've seen a lot of posts about it. I haven't looked into it that much. Lukas, do you know much about it?
No, never figured out how it works.
So Elliott, I mean, I think you've got a license. Do you want to tell us a bit about Depends 2 it is and why it's so loved all of a sudden?
Yeah. So taking you back to probably about 2 years ago, I remember I was at Pro Light and Sound, and I saw this random stall with fountains on 3D, and they were saying that they're basically making a new visualization software for the entertainment industry. And the guy, I can't remember what the guy's name was, but he said if you can visualize water, you can visualize entertainment lighting. And I was like, wow, that's a cool thing. And now they've kind of released it. I think it was maybe 6 months ago they released Depends. I'm not really sure. Or Depends 2. And everyone's jumping on it because it seems to be kind of one of the best rendering softwares out there for rendering, not for plans, just for rendering and for visuals. And it's like little things that Capture and WYSIWYG struggle with, like I don't know, flower effects for Roby fixtures, like a spiky or a spider or a BI or something. It can visualize those as well, and it really knows how to kind of use the lights and what the lights want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it is very. It's definitely. I mean, the videos I've been seeing coming out of it are just mind-bogglingly detailed. I mean, even the freaking characters are playing their guitars. So
Yeah, exactly. And you can do little things like you can actually import in animations of your, say you've got an artist and they've got some kind of 3D animation of themselves or a 3D model of themselves. You can actually make animations so they can walk around the stage, have a microphone, they can and get all the correct shadows and stuff, and the choreography. It's so kind of limitless what they're doing, and I think it's great. But I'm just going to shout this out. I might get told off, but Tim Routledge is doing a thing on
Oh
Monday,
yes.
a webinar, I think it is. So
Make
head
sure you
over
get the
and
link to
see that if you guys want to have a look at that, because I think he'll probably show a little bit more than everyone else is doing at the moment. So
He did. I'm trying to find the link to that because he did announce it, but I can't even remember the link to it. But yeah, no, definitely. What he's going to show will. I mean, I'll be watching it. It's going to be very, very interesting to see. So I guess just from there, why don't we hop into a bit of talking about Ryan George? Are we playing Warzone later? Hey, Elliott, are we playing Warzone later?
of course we are always playing Warzone later.
Definitely, Ryan's going to be carrying us again. Let's jump into talking a bit about your work and kind of. Obviously, you've spoken like what you've done, but if you're happy to and willing to, why don't we hop into a bit of the back end kind of idea and looking at the Charlie. So if you want to maybe bring us some images and explain your thought behind them, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you to prep any of this, but
Yeah. So Charlie Tour, it was quite an interesting one. It started off in the States. I work with an amazing creative called Jed. I'd love to be able to say his last name, but I can't pronounce it. So Jed Vision Ohm, I think it is on Instagram. And we just wanted to come up with something really kind of random, and really her new album's so experimental, and I love seeing really kind of tight time coded shows when there's like lots of little blips in the music and stuff, and you can really dial in on the moods and the feels. And I think I always start with listening to the music, and I put it in on my car probably every time I go out, and constantly listen to it, just so you get the kind of the music in your head, you get the rhythm, you get the feel, and you get like the emotion behind it. And then I think in the end, what we created was something really kind of slick and so simple for what it was. It was only, I think, I can't remember how many lights it was, but it wasn't many lights, and we were on a really tight budget. But I think kind of if you use the lights in the right way, you can make like small packages seem massive.
yeah, if you throw as
Pardon the pun.
many JDC ones as you can afford at that package, it looks even better.
Yeah.
So actually, yeah.
No, go on.
So what I was going to bring up is that you're obviously a massive fan of the JDC one. There's a GLP article about you and your use of the JDC one. So do you want to talk about why you like the JDC one so much and what about it you really like to use during this tour?
Yeah. So starting from a blank canvas, well, for Charlie anyway, I said that I wanted something experimental, and the JDC's fit is perfect. And there's so many different looks you can get out of one light. So you don't need to, like, say you got a flare, you still miss the atomic, you still miss all the pixel mapping, proper pixel mapping on them. So with the JDC, you can obviously I've got a really cool user profile, fixture profile on the desk that I can separate the cells, the strobe cells, the back plates, and the strobe plate all together. So I can really mimic kind of when I want, I bring an atomic look in, and there's quite a few bright looks, and then there's just so many minimal looks with the cells, and you don't need many lights to do that. Like again with Dave in last year with Tim was so creative with the floor package we created for the tour, just filled with JDCs, just because there's so many looks you can get out of them, and they're not limited to one. And it's not, people see for the headline show we had I think 100 and something GLP JDCs,
Yeah.
and I told them, and they were like, you can't put that many strobes in a rig. And when they understood like how you use them, and it's not a strobe, it's actually more of like a pixel mappable light with a little strobe element built in, and it happens to be super bright. I think they've GLP have absolutely smashed it.
No, definitely. I mean, I'm just bringing up the article here that I'm going to quickly link in the chat as well. For a nice plug for Elliott. It does give you that aspect of being able to it's not just a strobe. Obviously, you look at the atomic line. I mean, the atomic LED, it has that LED section, but it's not pixel mappable and it's not that bright when it comes to it. But Lukas, what are your thoughts on the JDC one? Because I'm sure, so me and Christoff in the awkward position where we haven't really seen one live, given that no one in South Africa owns them because they're too
We
expensive.
don't have access to those cool fixtures down
We,
here.
we don't buy, our companies don't buy expensive fixtures.
Yeah, it's
So yeah.
80,000 rand a fixture. That's crazy.
So Lukas, do you want to discuss what you feel about them?
Same for me. I haven't really touched them myself yet. But I heard a lot about them, especially in the context of MA2 fixture types, because there are apparently like several dimmer attributes on the same fixture, and it's like really bullshit.
Yeah, but that goes back to MA2's being terrible at handling multi-instance fixtures to a degree.
Yeah,
Those it
and it
treats
goes
as-
back to the partly very bad fixture type library.
Yeah, which is obviously something MA3 is working heavily on. I mean, if you anime just back to MA3, when you load up the show files and they have all the multi-instance fixtures, it's really cool to be able to go through them and see how they're handling multi-instance fixtures now. And if you use multi-instance fixtures and you haven't tried an MA3, now's the time. Go spend some time looking at it. It is very interesting. It does address, I think, and help MA's case when it comes to that kind of aspect of having a well, I lost my train of thought. Question: how to connect two fixtures? What do you mean by how to connect two fixtures? Are you talking in terms of DMX, which is just a 5 or 3 pin DMX cable between them, and then obviously your controller? Obviously, there's ArtNet. If you have like, what fixtures do ArtNet? Straight into them, Roby, or most of the new Roby stuff does
Some
it.
of the Roby stuff, some Claypacker stuff does it.
Yeah. So there's many different ways to connect two fixtures together. We need a bit more information than that to help you out with that. Yeah. So they have strange cable, what I have never seen before.
It's probably one of those all the like 1990 protocols, like just before DMX,
Yeah.
or it's Chinese.
Or it's Chinese. That's what I was gonna get to. Obviously, Chinese is always a
You get
an
our fair share
aspect
of Chinese lights
when
down
you
here.
bring it. We do. I mean, but I'm sure, Lukas, I'm sure you had your fair run into them as well, and Elliott. Chinese fixtures. I think I think Chinese fixtures has been one of our most discussed topics on this channel.
Yes, it is.
Because I go into rants about them so often.
Yeah, friend of mine just bought a ton of them, and he really likes them because like he has no money to spend on anything basically, and then he buys China moving lights and stuff.
And they just break. And then
I don't know how to feel about that. It feels like really weird to see them in a serious situation and then thinking, oh, but that's like a $30 moving light. It's like breaking in any second.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, and the thing is, you're seeing a lot of, and we've discussed it before, but Elliott, I'm sure you can weigh in on this. Is a lot of festivals are even using Chinese fixtures in their rigs.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it happened before during our last stream, but obviously, if you look at like Ultra Main Stage, they've switched to a lot of Chinese fixtures. We saw a lot of Coachella last year, where they used those IP65 rated fixtures. There's like weird looking things, and yeah, so it definitely is. So Elliott, what have you had any encounters with them that you regret?
Yeah, I've had lots of encounters with them that I really regret. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to festival season. If you want 100 lights or 200 lights and you've got a specific budget, you're like, especially you mentioned Ultra Main Stage, they're not going to be able to find however many Roby pointies for that one stage on one of the probably busy weekends during the summer. So I kind of do sympathize, and as long as they work, it's kind of it's what it is. But if you've got a crucial light like a backlight or a key light or something, and it does play up, that's a bit annoying. But if it's just a beam, or if it's just like a wash light and it works, and you can't really fault it.
Yes, I mean, I guess when you do look in that aspect, if you look at like Ultra Main Stage comes to mind, the key lights were still like Vipers, I think. And they were Vipers. They also had a ton of spiders and magic panels. So it does come into where it could very well be a quantity issue. And then on Coachella, in the Sahara tent, the Sahara stage now, it's not really a tent anymore. They obviously had a lot of mega pointies and JDC ones as on top of the beam fixtures that we're using.
Yeah.
That is. So another question from, I'm not going to try and pronounce that. Store /. Do you mean what does that syntax do, or something else? I'm guessing that's what the syntax do, and it's just allows you to store in the different store modes. Do you disagree?
Store / question mark is a shortcut to get
Is
like the
it?
help for the store command in the command line.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wait, so you just type store / question mark, you get the help thing?
Yeah, I can show you. You just enable command
Store
/ question mark, and then it tells you what you can do with this command. You can like what options you can append to it, like /override, /merge, /remove, and all that good stuff.
And this also applies to any really command you can do.
Yes.
Get a command line. So it really helps for when you're building macros and stuff like that, just to check that you've got the right.
I just go open the freaking act lighting syntax options base. I think all of us do that, though. I think all of us I can't imagine many people don't have that syntax options thing from Acts listed.
Another very helpful syntax in the context of learning about commands and what they can do is CMD help, which just puts you like prints you a list of all possible commands that you can put into the command line.
Yeah.
There's also some stuff in there that you like probably never heard of, and then think, oh, that's possible. Cool.
Yeah. So another thing, well, do you think in current situation getting fixtures out of China is a good idea? #Corona. I don't think we can really use that as a defining attribute or defining reason as to not choose those fixtures. And obviously there's the whole idea of, and this is going way out of the lighting spectrum, so we shouldn't talk about it for too long, but obviously the whole idea of profiling, racial profiling that's been happening due to the coronavirus, which is very bad. Don't do that. Let's go back to lighting.
I think he means like, anyway, I know who the guy is, and greetings, they're in Dubai, sitting out there probably in the sun, so they're better than all of us
No,
right
it's night time now, ain't it?
Oh yeah, probably about 9:30. But I think he meant like, do you reckon fixtures are still being made and being sent out and shipped from China at the moment? But obviously, yeah, China isn't. If anyone, they're a few weeks ahead of all of us, so they're probably laughing.
I mean, you're talking about they've had a couple of days now where they haven't had any reported cases, I believe, like any domestic cases at least. So it's showing that if all countries in the world take the precautions they need to take, we could look at still having a couple of the summer festivals happening, and just talking about, obviously we could have it that the disease isn't an issue anymore, which is the big deal, but just from an entertainment perspective, there's the possibility we'll start actually seeing shows happening again this year. But I mean, even if they do lift the restrictions, festivals can't really get planned in a week. So obviously, if their dates are close,
yeah, that's the problem. Also, for some events that I'm doing, I'm right now. I should plan stuff that I'm not really sure I could really do then in August, because I mean the situation isn't clear, and I mean you can't start planning it weeks like 2 weeks before or something. Like you need the time.
So I think the other thing that's worth talking about is obviously we've all taken a pay hit. We've all so in South Africa, I don't think, Christoff, maybe you can give me some more, because I've given me some more information on this. I don't think the government currently has any plans to help gig workers.
So there is some payment schemes in play, but it's a very long application process for it.
Oh, yeah.
Me being permanently employed, so luckily I'm still getting paid even if I'm sitting at home.
Yeah. So you're in a bit of a fortunate position because you are kind of protected.
A lot of the freelancers and artists are struggling right now
Yeah.
because they lost about a quarter of their yearly income just there.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it hits pretty much in winding down, heading over, or sorry, not winding down, like at the end of our summer. So we still had a couple of shows left, but it wasn't massive. Obviously, for the Northern Hemisphere, it's happening at the beginning of theirs. So that's why we're seeing a massive cancellation and what's going to further on. Elliott, I think there was stuff announced in the UK today about how you guys are protected.
Yeah, there was a few announcements. There was one last week about limited companies, and one I think it was yesterday actually, regarding freelancers. Just that they're going to do a support scheme of what your last 3 tax returns were, and just average it out, and then pay 80% of it. Which I think is good, and I think they're really supporting businesses. Obviously, I think there's been a bit of problems if you're a limited company and you're a single director. You don't get too much support. But at the end of the day, it's better than nothing. And I think everyone needs to realise at this moment, like, you could have absolutely no income coming in, and the government are not supporting you like some countries. And I know Germany's doing something as well. I believe, which Lukas, you can probably touch on, but I believe they're doing something.
Yeah, as an like corporation, you are able to get like very good credits and stuff, and you can also use the Kurzarbeitergeld, that's how it's called here in Germany, which basically means that the state is giving you some money for paying your workers. You don't have to pay them fully anymore, so it's basically just so that you can still employ them throughout the pandemic, and after then you get no more extra money. You have to pay your workers again, but you don't have to, like, they don't have to leave the actual company. So that's good for like the like bigger event corporations and stuff. That's all fine, I think, like from my perspective. But for all the freelancers and people who are like always on their own, they are basically in a not so good position where they are not able to profit from those credits, because they can't really work more after the pandemic to pay back those credits. So it's like you get help, but it's not really that helpful. So that's the situation right now, as I can think about it.
So a conversation I was having with some other people in South Africa is just the long-term effects, because obviously coronavirus is eventually going to come to an end and the pandemic is going to end, but how it's affected our industry will remain to be seen. Obviously, that we could land up in a situation where people are scared to even attend shows because they're worried if somebody, for any reasons, had the coronavirus or had something else, they could get it. I think that's going to, in the coming obviously years at this rate, be playing an important factor in how events are going to happen. But I mean, I think the other interesting thing to note is the rise in online festivals that we've recently seen.
Oh yes.
I think I already quote. I know there's a big one happening next week, which I wanted to plug because it looks really cool, from the Proximity YouTube channel, where they've got a ton of artists. They've got, just off the top of my head, Alice in Wonderland's going to be there, Artie, Sophie Tucker, and a bunch of other pretty big names. And I mean, is that what we could be seeing in the future? What do you guys think? No?
I mean,
Well, I'll jump in from a standpoint from down here in South Africa. A lot of companies kind of lost all of their gigs here, and then they were setting up to be ready to use their warehouses as studio space and live stream and stuff like that. And then we just went into lockdown officially from today onwards, where even that income they've lost because they can't leave their home. They can't go out to site or to a studio to film and do a new show. And the thing is, at the moment we're on a 3-week lockdown, but we're not sure if it's going to actually be done after 3 weeks and if it's going to get worse or not. So yeah, a lot of companies might not survive this. Unfortunately, we'll have to see.
I think that's a worldwide trend at this rate. Is everyone, anyone that was completely dependent, didn't really have savings, is kind of in a bad situation. And I think the interesting aspect to note about that is when you look at everyone that's gone into lockdown at the moment, how the first thing they do is go to the entertainment industry to help keep them entertained during this time, and how they expect everyone to help out, but everyone is still suffering. And I mean, just back to the online thing, Elliott, do you think this could be a sustainable idea where they could still have massive festival stages, but maybe they just live stream it all?
Yeah, potentially, but then I feel like people probably wouldn't pay as much. And you don't get the kind of vibe, do you?
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
you watch a festival on YouTube and you think, oh, it's great, but it's nothing like until you've
It's
been
not the
there
same.
and you
It's not the
feel
same energy you get from
kind
a
of.
live show.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, they can't obviously can't emulate the feeling you'd have of being at the show.
I'm
So it's just
surprised they
an interesting
haven't televised Glastonbury. I thought even though they cancelled it, they would do like a
Yeah.
Glastonbury TV thing for the rest of the public.
When is
and I
Glastonbury meant to happen? September? No, July?
think it's July or
Yeah.
June.
I mean, at the current rate, there is the possibility we might still be in a almost total lockdown, which wouldn't really allow for artists to be flown in or any of that aspects to happen. So yeah, I definitely think that's an issue. It's an issue that we're all going to face in the next couple months. I'm fortunate that I'm not completely reliant on my income just yet, but as Christoff mentioned, there's a lot of people that their businesses and they won't survive this thing. Lukas, Christoff is a bit quiet.
Yes, but I already put him on 200%, so I can't do any
Okay,
more.
let me just lift it on my side. Let's see.
Yes,
about
that would help. Okay, so Lukas, do you want to discuss your PowerMA open source Lua project?
Yeah, maybe it's a great idea to do this now. Basically, what I was thinking, hey, what about plugins? Like, you can program Lua plugins, of course, but it's not that great of an experience because you don't got the code highlighting inside the MA, so you're always going back and forth between your code editor and the MA, copying, pasting stuff, and it's all not that great. But you can improve your workflow with like programming macros or plugins that automatically import your changed plugins or stuff like that. You could also write helper functions that like do stuff easily, like for example doing stuff that requires to run in a loop or something, and you do your looping macros, which is like really a pain in the butt when you're doing it manually and programming every line yourself. And I was thinking, what about a helper plugin that just like helps you out with like those typical situations where macros are just a hassle to work with. And that was like the initial thought that I had for this whole PowerMA thing. And then I thought, yeah, but also the plugin API isn't that great because it doesn't really give you feedback for if your command has actually executed properly or not. So you're starting to guess, oh, has it worked or not? You don't know really. Your plugin just keeps on running even though something hasn't worked out in a line before, so everything crashes or does something else and you are not even noticing it because there's no like proper output in the console that shows you, oh, something ran wrong here and it's like this issue. So for someone who does not have any experience with coding or like catching errors with a programming language that's actually only a scripting language and is also dead, like Lua is not developed anymore, it's like it's done. The question I ask myself is, why do they still implement Lua and not something like Python, which would be an active developed language, for example? So
Which would actually be useful because it doesn't start at the number 1.
yeah, like that's
Yeah.
something else very weird about Lua. Like every fucking programming language starts to count at 0, and Lua does count from 1.
At 1.
Like why?
They want it
Okay.
to be unique. Like they want to be the blue-haired person in the class.
I think that's one of the reasons why they're now no longer a programming language, or like discontinued in a sense.
Yes, maybe. So that was all the thoughts that I had when I started to figure out Lua in CrandMA 2.
Yeah.
And then I thought, why don't do like this one plugin that's called PowerMA, because you can abbreviate that with PMA, which is then a very short alternative to GMA in your plugins. And you could just lay out all your beautiful error catching and stuff in a layer between your actual plugin and the CrandMA API. So you are able to catch those bugs. You are able to tell the user if it has worked out or not, and all that good stuff. So that's the whole idea.
Yeah. So you mentioned that that'll be open source, and so obviously once it's fully released, we'll have a video up about it, explaining it and how you guys can use it.
That's one of the
guessing?
thoughts, of course, yes. But I also think that this plugin should be a whole community thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I could also like dump in hours and hours to figure out all the stuff on my own and write all the lines of code that I need to fully like check for all the errors a user could make before he like executes to the API and stuff. But it's really it's a big thing because you have a lot of commands and ways to interact, and it's not only done with checking for the right input type, if it's a boolean, if it's an integer, or if it's a string.
Yeah.
There's more to it when you are thinking about the actual syntax of the console and how you have to input commands so the console actually responds with a proper thing. So checking those things is like the hard part about it. And I thought making this thing open source, developing it on GitHub, and inviting other people that wanna maybe push that forward to contribute to would be the right way to go. So that's why there is a GitHub repository that I will now send a link for into the chat.
Okay, so moving on from that, Elliott, do you maybe want to talk us through a bit of your programming style, if you're open to that? Just I think we always like to get, and Christoff will also get onto you, just to always get a different perspective on how others program, and maybe some tips you could share with the audience.
Yeah. Is there anything specifically?
So since you do a lot of time code, what's your like general workflow when it comes to time coding a song?
Okay, so yeah, this is a good question because it seems like everyone does this differently. So normally, I hate going over songs over and over again and stopping and starting. I just absolutely hate it. So normally, I work with the main queue stack first with a song. I'll put the song on. I'll listen to it once. I'll then record time code. I'll put time code in to record, and then I'll just record a bunch of just blank queues with nothing in. And as I go down the song, I'll just go store please, and then just click go at the point that I need more. At the point of the track where more queues need to be. And it's just a quicker way of doing it, I find, rather than a lot of people kind of make the queues and then they do put the time code in, then they do the bumps. I feel like that's just a bit of a slow way, and I know a lot of guys, the kind of bigger guys as well, do it my way because I feel like it's just a lot more efficient. And then after that, I'll label the queues, I'll put the content in at last, and then I'll do the bumps. Normally, all the content comes in last, so recording not recording presets, recording some kind of cues in or content into the executors come last rather than first.
So obviously, if you you're thinking more then about where you want changes to happen as opposed to what specific looks you might want at that point. So the looks kind of come
Yeah.
afterwards, or is it as you're working through, you're thinking of both the looks and where you think looks should change, and fixtures should come in and go out, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I normally just do it based on change because I know I might not use every single queue, or I might use it, but there might be no change in a queue. But it's better to have it in because say you hear a change and you don't think it needs anything, but then the artist comes to you and goes, "Oh, just on that little bit, can you change something?" You've already got the queue there; it's already programmed, it's
Yeah.
already in time code. Like you could just go ahead and update the queue, and it's already there, rather than kind of doing kind of the basics and then go into stuff more kind of complex. It's not worth it. I would just literally store please is your best friend, especially so near on the MA3. It's just literally I use two fingers.
All right. So just a question from Morgan Evans Media: do you manually mark your queues, or do you use Move in Black?
So it depends. I don't do a lot of theatre, so I'm not too deep into Moving Black, but typically I will always do them in Moving Black, unless it's anything complex, and then I don't. But I normally have Q 0.5 at every sequence for time code, which basically just sets all my lights up. And then what I'll do is I'll say kind of store Q 0.5, it'll track through, and then whenever I make the change next,
Yeah.
I can either have it tracking up or tracking back down.
Yeah. So obviously in your Charlie show, that would have just been a black state where there was a changeover, but so I obviously stole it from you. I use a similar aspect in my file where my first Q, also Q.5, would be a blue look. So that's just everything in blue to just have some light on the stage, because the main work I've done in that aspect has been bands. But that would be just a completely creative direction, I guess.
Normally do it differently. The 0.5 normally just sets up my lights for the song, and I have a separate executor for like a weighting look, just because then I know when I click the macro, my lights are already going to turn off my weighting look. But then everyone does it differently. I've seen so many people.
Yeah. So Christoff, you obviously work mainly in theatre.
Yeah,
How
mainly
does your programming, and when you do festivals, you use the file I programmed?
Sometimes, yeah. Once or twice now.
Your last two major festivals. So in theatre, how does your programming technique usually go?
The thing I've got going now at the theatre I am is I end up programming the show and handing it off to an operator, which also does the updating of the show. So I can't take the file and make it too in-depth or add too many customizations of my own that would somehow confuse the operator taking the file from me. Mainly because I work with a whole bunch of designers. They always the designers I work with at least are veterans. They don't understand some of the newer stuff in the console. So you would try and explain to them why they can't do a certain thing, and they wouldn't fully grasp it. So the majority of my stuff, I've got a macro that I just do that stores the look, and it also just clears out everything I had running in a previous queue, just to prevent any tracking issues from popping up with an operator and then kind of stopping the show. Because we also do a whole bunch of integration with QLab for both content as well as backtracks and clicks that get queued from the MA. So mainly just trying to keep it as simple as possible while still getting the designer's point of view onto stage.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So in your, I mean, I don't do a ton of theatre. Elliott, I don't know if you've done a ton of theatre either, but obviously Lukas, you have done quite a bit of theatre, I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So knowledgeable. So obviously, for you guys, it's all about programming a single queue stack, whereas in Elliott and my cases, it's a bit more of programming however many queue stacks we need to get the job done, I guess. But obviously one main queue stack and then a bunch of other stuff, like a lot of 2 queue bumps. Yeah. Zehenia Frosty, are you just like dropping random command line stuff into the chat?
Oh, I
That's,
just realized I was muted with my last sentence. Well.
Do you want to repeat it for us, or you good?
I don't know since when I was muted.
That's an awkward situation. So yeah, so definitely there are a ton of different ways to program. I think that's the pretty interesting aspect when you're at a festival where there's a ton of touring LDs coming in, and you see how each of them handles their files differently. Obviously, down in South Africa, how LDs all, well, not really, but you see a lot more of a, and Christoff, I think you can attest this too. You see a lot more of a almost generic kind of way of setting out the files.
Yeah, it's always the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
import the default effects, just have one page of execs, and then kind of if they have to do anything, they just do direct call, and that's about it.
So it's kind of all just, instead of running from executors or that kind of stuff, or fancy layout views or that.
Presets are direct call,
Yeah.
effects are direct call, and then bumps and stuff like that, and maybe a few intensities and speeds. That's all they kind of program. I've seen all these program like New Year's Eve festivals that pull like north of 10,000 people, and he literally spent 5 minutes just importing default effects, doing a couple of positions, and said, "That's all I'm going to do for this 14, 15-hour busking session.
Yeah. So I think that is I mean, Elliott, you've also just started working on your summer touring file for next year at this rate.
Yeah.
How are you approaching a busking situation coming from because obviously, I mean, you did have a busking file that you used last would have been back in like 2018 at this point. How are you approaching? What kind of ideas have you had behind the file you're going to be building now? Obviously, not giving away too much, but what do you want to add into your file?
Yeah, so I've been kind of privileged to build my file like 3 years ago and just kind of stuck with it. And I thought with the whole coronavirus thing, I'll start kind of totally from fresh attitude. And I have a massive whiteboard in my room that I basically just write exactly what I want to do. And you really have to think kind of what you're programming your show file to do and what kind of shows, because obviously a corporate show and a live show and an EDM show are all going to be very different. So you just kind of you've got to go with it. I'm using bitmaps a lot at the moment. That's my new thing, rather than effects. And I'm building a bitmap engine as we speak, to basically use bitmaps in a way rather than doing symmetrical selections, which I think you do, isn't that right? You do this symmetrical
Yeah. So
selection.
I don't like the bitmap engine. I don't like. I think it's very cool for a lot of things, but I think it's also can be used as a bit of a crutch to avoid doing any too intricate kind of things. So I focus more on getting my file to a point where if I give it symmetrical selections a couple different ways, so I have a left-right symmetrical and just a normal symmetrical, then it'll auto-create all my special effects and kind of delay wipes and all that. And then from there, I would just spend time creating other interesting things based on the rig. So yeah, I don't use a ton of bitmap. I've got a sneaky way of using the bitmap engine and using bitmaps in general in my file, which I kind of like, where I'm able to select it and then it's part of it's a queue. Because I use Christian Jackson's file as my main source of inspiration, as I think half the YouTube MA universe does at this rate, where each of my fixture types has a queue list of intensity and top queues intensity and the rest is effects. And one of those queues is now a bitmap queue, and then I can select a bitmap file and it'll play through that. If that makes sense.
Do you use bitmaps with presets?
I don't a ton. I've seen it used a lot. I can't mention names because that'll get me in trouble, but I know a couple oldies that do use it. It's cool, but it's also a thing of like they're simpler and more like reliable in a sense ways, because I feel like the bitmap engine you can just especially with how you have to like have your content out, and you can't have as kind of organic looks, I think, because a lot of the time the content you'll be using will be a white object moving across the thing. You're not going to be able to get, especially when like an intensity look, you're not going to be able to get those as smooth intensity rises and falls as you would with just an effect, because you're working with pixels and you're working with the compression, the codec that they use, and how it can mess up everything. OnePlus, could you post a link to Christian's file? No, I think the only way you can get his file is if you pay for it. Head over to his channel, and I'm sure you can find a lot of stuff. Shout out Christian, he's the best.
You can find it on his
Glenn,
Patreon.
yeah, you can find it on his Patreon. I think you have to obviously pay to be on that level to get it. Glenn,
Otherwise,
that's one of
even you could send him your troll file that you once built.
Oh gosh. I still want to do a freaking one that has a startup, which is just /shutdown/no confirm.
Yes.
That I say everyone that wants my file.
But on all other consoles first, and then on your own.
Yeah. Okay, Glenn Weir, who's one of Elliot's UK friends. Well, he's at least in the group where I don't know if they're friends. At what point do you class yourself as a professional programmer, and on your first big job, were you worried that you would get there and not know something crucial? What do you say to that, Elliott?
I think, I mean, what if I don't class myself as a professional programmer now? could I not answer this question? But I think you just have to be confident, and I think you to be a professional programmer, you have to know you're gonna, no matter what situation you go into, you're gonna be able to
Solve it.
program it and solve it. Yeah, exactly that. And you know that you know the console well, you know the lights well, you know the rig well. I think that, and it can be even on a small scale. Like we obviously, there's so many people that say, "Oh, you're not a professional programmer if you don't use MA or whatever."
Yeah.
All of this, but
Which is
if
true.
you're going,
MA is the only console that you should use.
We are not paid for
going to
this,
a
actually.
Yeah.
if you go to a festival and you've got an Avalites, and you know no matter what happens, no matter what an LD throws at you, whatever, you're
Yeah.
going to be able to program what they want, then you're a professional programmer. Like,
Yeah.
as long as you're that confident. And what was the second part? And on your first job, what were you worried about? What would you get there? Yeah. And I think we'd all be lying if we were saying that we didn't turn up to a job and being a bit like, oh, I'm not sure whether I can do this, not sure. But then you learn things and you learn from mistakes. And I've definitely made a
Yeah.
few mistakes.
But the first time I did a gig on an MA2 was where I was paid to come in as a programmer, and I had one gig on a .2 before that, and kind of just jumped into the deep end, programmed 4
Yeah.
shows in the morning on the MA2, and then 4 dress rehearsals, 4 shows in the evening for 5 days straight. Where in that 5 days I kind of just taught myself MA, and then I haven't gone back to any other lighting
Yeah,
software.
you're still bad at programming though.
I'm getting there. Not
Hectic,
yeah,
hectic.
I think
Learning
it is a
MA
thing
in
of,
like 5 days. Oh, very
yeah,
hectic.
it's that, and I mean, but on that aspect, there's also a thing of always making sure that your client knows your limitations. I think you have to be upfront with your clients about that to some degree. Like, don't, because if you say, and Christoph's going to know exactly what I'm talking about right now. If you say, for example, Avalites, but you only know MA, don't tell your clients you know Avalites, and when you get to site and they give you an Avalites desk, you can't use it, because that's going to create a worse name for you. And you can make the argument of you want to take every gig you get, and you do, but if you get a gig and they can't give you the console, and you don't have enough time to learn it, you're going to give yourself a worse name in your local industry by messing up that show because you don't know the console than you are by saying, look, it's a limitation of mine. I can't take that show on. Unless you guys disagree. Anyone?
I'm agreeing to you always.
Cool. Elliott, what do you have to say about that? Do you think it's better to rather turn down a show if you're not confident enough to be able to program on the console they want, or for any other reason, or to kind of just take it and hope for the best?
Am I speaking from past experience or from what my opinion is now? Because I have to admit, like maybe 2 years ago, my opinion would be slightly different. That a gig's a gig, and you get to meet all these wonderful people and whatever. But if you can't deliver the show that they're after, or you can't deliver the professional kind of show that they're after, then you're just going to get a bad name for yourself. So it's much better to be upfront with the client and say, no, I don't know how to do this, or no, I don't feel too confident doing this. And maybe they might say, okay, well, we'll negotiate a fee, or we'll negotiate a deal on your terms or whatever. And some clients will do that just because you've openly kind of said, look, I'm not too confident on this. And I see it a lot with timecode, specifically, like, oh, I can do amazing stuff on the MA, but I've never really done too much on timecode, and kind of you see that a lot, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what's just, it is very important to be upfront with your clients, because we regardless of where you are in the world, it's a very, like, who you know can affect what you do and what people know you from. So if people have had a bad experience with you and they spread that around, it can hurt you pretty hectically. So it's very important to just be upfront with what you can do, and that kind of aspect.
And obviously, real life experience is much different to being a uni or at college or in previs. Like, it's stress and everything that you don't have to deal with. You might have done loads of stuff on the MA at home on PC, but if you get to site, and like, there's a really good one that someone told me, I think it was about a year ago. If you want to select every light that isn't red, how do you do it on MA? And I had to think about it for like an hour and go, well, how would you do that if you wanted to select everything that isn't red? So it's just little things like that, just kind of.
And there's also just, especially if it's your first show, it's all the other things that come into life, because obviously if you've been working a lot at home with MA2 on PC and MA3D, like the situation I was in, once you get to site, it's a vastly different game in terms of how you're actually getting DMX to the fixtures. So you've got to be confident. You have to have had spent time learning ArtNet or streaming ACN or MANet, depending. Well, obviously MANet you should know, but depending on how you're going to be getting your DMX to the rig, that's another aspect to look at. And there's also just, if you speak from a uni or a at-home thing, if you from like a uni idea, I don't exactly know how uni works over there, but sometimes I think you're told to program in a 3D environment and then it can be made real. Is that a thing?
I have no idea, but probably.
Yeah, I think it's like where you might, for a practical, have to program a show in a 3D environment, and then they'll actually have the rig and it'll be shown. When you work on a show where you might have a previs environment, so they might the festival or the show might send you a 3D file. What they give you is very seldomly going to be what you find on site. Something is always going to have changed. Not always, but it's very seldom there won't be a fixture that's been moved or a fixture that's been cut, that kind of idea. And you have to be ready to adapt your file and adapt whatever you've programmed to account for those changes on site. Or they might have added fixtures or swapped fixture types. That's also always a possibility. So it's just very important to know how to deal with those and not get stressed out when you get to site and you're looking at your 3D environment and seeing that what's been built is vastly different. I mean, Christoff, you had this pretty much exact situation last year, December, where you got on site for Corona and they've hung the pointies differently from what was planned.
They hung
And
the hung the pointies differently. There was 2 fixture type swaps, but yeah, eventually when I found out what the issue was, it was the file just kind of started working again, which was good.
Yeah.
But it took some troubleshooting, not gonna lie. But yeah,
It is. I mean, for you're also in the awkward predicament of you were running my file which you didn't really necessarily know how to go back through the process of getting everything working.
yeah.
And I think that's just why it's very important before you go to site to kind of just play out in your mind different situations that could happen and how you're going to deal with them. Or else you could end up making yourself look like an arse on site when you start freaking out and you don't know what to do.
And what always helps for those situations is to just be more broadly interested in the topic, not just like being focused on optimizing your workflow with MA2. Like that's the one thing, but the other thing is knowing what has to connect with it and how do those protocols work, how do fixtures work, just to be able to problem solve properly.
So I mean, what was that question, Elliott? You asked me a question a while ago about the difference or the similarities between ArtNet and streaming ACN.
Yes.
Could you just ask that question? Let's not answer it, but just ask that question. And if you're new in the industry, and you don't necessarily know the answer to this question, go and read and learn until you can answer this question. So Elliott, what was that question?
Cool. It is a really cool question. So what is the difference between streaming ACN and ArtNet, and what is the difference between them both for the data packets? So how do the data packets differentiate? How do you differentiate the data packets between ArtNet and streaming ACN?
So maybe why don't we talk about some other stuff for a bit? And if you're watching this afterwards, pause the stream now. If you don't know the answer, go and research as much as you can and come back, and in like 5 minutes we'll get onto answering that. But we've got 2 questions. Again from Glenn. What's been your worst case of getting to a festival site and it being vastly different to the design or previous file? So for me, I haven't had many, but the main one was they literally cut an entire section of fixtures and this was a time-coded show, so it kind of, there were a lot of moments that had specifically used just that set of fixtures for whatever reason, and I only got programming time the day before the show, so I had to then obviously go home and reprogram everything in the 3D environment, matching what was now built on site. Elliott, yours?
Yeah. Well, I've got 2 ones that stand out for me. I once had one that was just a completely different fixtures, and they'd basically sent over a PSR file with just kind of whatever we'd spec'd, but obviously that weren't the substitutions on site. The best one was actually we spent 2 days programming Governor's Ball for New York, and then they sent us the wrong stage pre-visualization. So we were programming for 2-3 days for one stage, and then it was a completely different stage, and they'd changed it. So it was just the wrong stage.
Sure, it's haven't heard of that happening before, but it's I'm sure it inevitably does pop up. Lucas, what has been your worst situation in this field in terms of sites being different?
I can't decide on which was the worst one, but like different stuff. Lately I had to control kinetic lights, and yeah, and I had good contact to kinetic lights themselves, and they tried to fix it. They ran TeamViewer sessions on the laptop. They actually provided with their software on it, and they weren't able to make their own software on their own laptop work, which was a bit sad. But they know that they have to improve on that, and they are really after it. But in the end, it wasn't a working solution, and I, as the operator, was viable for it. So I had to find a solution, and that's where the problem solving kicks in. So me thinking about how do I control those winches now. And funny thing is, it was the winches with the mirrors and with the pixel rings around it. And the funny second thing is, in every of those winches is just a little ArtNet controller from Schnick Systems, which you can directly control by MA if you find those IP addresses and just change the configuration over the not secured web page that you can configure them on. So I figured that out like on day 2 before show. And I just reprogrammed all of the winches, made them able to directly be controlled by ArtNet. And then another software jumped in, which was stage precision software, which enabled me to then control the winches with their software. So I have actual control of the mirror object in MA. So I have a mirror with a height and a rotation and a tilt and a pan and stuff, instead of having to control the height of every individual winch, which would be hard in the MA, especially when thinking about stuff like safety. You don't want to have an angle higher than blah blah blah. You can't really make the relation between those 3 winches so fixed in the MA that you can't like send other values. So I wanted this layer of safety, and I had access to the stage precision software, which made that possible. So that was my last minute solution that I got ready one day before show, and then it worked. But I was a bit pissed because I tried to make it work with kinetic light software for like 2 or 3 days, and it hasn't worked out. And I was like, every evening when I went to the hotel, I thought, oh my god, this ain't gonna work. If they are not fixing it, I'm fucked. So then at one point I just told myself, okay, I can't wait on them fixing it. It's like fucking 2 days before show. I have to find another solution. And yeah, so that was maybe the worst situation that I have been in.
And for you, Christoff?
I mean, most of the stuff that I've had to troubleshoot on site was primarily just making fixture profiles for Chinesium lights. Getting on site, and then spec was like Robin Klepaki kit, and then you get on site and there's no name brands on site and no fixture profiles on the desk either. Like they say they've got a fixture profile, but it's on one of their Avos or Champs' desks at the warehouse, and that's about what they have for it because that's what they got from the supplier. So my biggest troubleshooting kind of snares I've hit was just building profiles on site, just sitting there for 2-3 hours and figuring out all of the fixture profiles for the rig, and then getting the PSR file ready for the rest of the LDs.
Yeah. Alrighty. So then, just one more question, then we'll go back to the answer about the ArtNet and streaming ACN question. How do I get into lighting, or just getting into an industry seems a bit daunting. Also, where did you start learning lighting? And then just to give a bit of context, I'm asking as someone who has no knowledge on lighting. So I'll hop in with my answer, and I'm guessing you guys can all take off. Mine's just go on the internet, learn a console, learn ArtNet, learn that kind of stuff, and then reach out to your local warehouse and your local providers and see if you can't help out with the show. That's probably the easiest way to And by how part of the show, you're probably going to end up just like coiling cable or moving lights or something. But it's the start that you need to eventually get up to a programming or designing spot. Elliott?
I'd just say network as much as possible with
Yeah.
everyone. I mean, social media is such a big tool of this, and really, I think if it weren't for Facebook and for Instagram and everything, that the industry would be kind of really boring and not many new people and young people getting into it. So I would say jump on Facebook straight away and just don't be one of these annoying people that constantly posts and constantly annoys everyone. Just gonna sit back. I'm not. Let's not even go there.
Let's not name and
And
shame, but yeah.
yeah.
That's
So
why we
I
post
would just
only
say
yearly, by the way.
Yeah, we don't want to annoy people.
so don't annoy people and try and make friends with everyone. Like if you see an LD's in your town and they're coming through for a show, just say, "Look, man, I'm trying to learn lighting. Can I come watch the show?" And I'm sure if they're a decent person, they'll let you
Yeah.
come and watch.
And this is speaking from my own story, and as a lesson I learned is it's an industry you have to stay incredibly humble in. Never think you're as big. However big you think your ego should be, it should be a 17th of that size. The industry, especially in South Africa, I don't know how it is overseas, is very unforgiving to people with a big ego. And I definitely learned that the hard way.
Yeah, I know that story.
Lukas, what advice would you provide?
Yeah, just stay interested in the topic and do your research. Try to always learn more. I mean, I started out in school with just helping with lighting there, and then I started doing the yearly events of the school, and so I did stuff outside of that. Started to like get other gigs and stuff. Like this is all a thing that evolves. You're not getting a lighting designer in like a week or something and then you're a lighting designer. I mean, you have to really develop your skill set and put a lot of work in, of course, like with every hobby or passion that you are going to pursue.
Yeah. Okay. And Chris, so just based on Lucas's thing, I have a similar story as on that I didn't mention is I started out in my school's technical department. I think if your school has a technical department, or if you're not, if obviously this applies if you're in school, if they have a technical department, it's very useful to go into that and try and see what you can learn. And half the time you can learn a lot, and you learn a lot about like MacGyvering solutions from working in schools. But yeah, so Christoff, what would you say in terms
I
of
think
that?
the other important thing to take into account is like everyone started differently in industry. Like there's no real one success story to follow to kind of get into the industry.
Yeah.
I started out actually as a sound guy. I did bands and stuff and bars and stuff around town, and then kind of worked my way into doing more stage managing of festivals and so, and then jumped into the lighting side kind of overnight, just in like a week's time. And it really doesn't, it's not really something that you can just follow set rule of guidelines and you're going to be one of the top LDs. You kind of have to figure it out for yourself and network and figure out, is this what you really want to do with your life?
There are obviously, like, if you want to go down the formal route, there are a lot of places that offer a formal degree in the entertainment industry, but I think it's a lot more what you learn about the industry is a lot more what you learn on site. Like the theory is very important, but a lot of the time the theory doesn't translate into real life, if that makes sense.
You need that real life experience. You need the contacts and the networking.
Yeah.
And now you're going to spend 4 years studying a degree in lighting, but you didn't work weekends, kind of networking and getting up experience as well. People are just going to say, cheers, get off site if you first time you do something that you're supposed to know after 4 years of studying, but they didn't teach you in school.
Yeah. So, and then just adding on to this, he asked, and to practice, how could you do that? Like, how would you do it on your own? So I think the easiest way is either design your own stage in MA3D if you're on the MA, or I think Ava also has a visualizer, if I'm not wrong.
They've got they use capture.
Oh, yeah.
Like
There's a
part of them,
couple,
yeah.
like, there's only a way, just make a rig, program on it, program songs, do whatever, and that's the easiest way. You can also, if you're on the MA, there's I think it's like MA 3D stages at WordPress, something like that. Where you can download other people's stages and work on those, and that's the easiest way. Is literally just build it in there, and that can help. It gives you a very good way to practice and then translate that to real life. So I think that's a good place to move back to the answer to the streaming ACN and ArtNet question. Elliott, do you want to give the answer to that?
Yeah. Did anyone respond?
No one
Nope.
did, which I'm pretty
No one
sad
did.
about. But that means, but now they can learn something new.
Okay, now I need to think of what the actual answer is. No. So I believe, from my understanding, ArtNet basically continuously sends out packets of data to every station, as I'd say, but maybe I'm not sure what the word is, device on the network, basically to say, hey, this is channel 0 at 255 or whatever, or channel 1 at 255. And streaming ACN only sends out the changes. So obviously, I think every half a second or every like a second, it will still send out one whole packet to say this is like the bottom line values, but then it only sends the change values. So streaming ACN is a lot less heavier on the network than ArtNet, and that's why I would always recommend trying to use streaming ACN.
And isn't that like either streaming ACN is based on ArtNet or ArtNet is based on streaming ACN?
Yeah, so I think it's ArtNet 3 or ArtNet 4. I'm pretty sure it's ArtNet 3. You obviously get ArtNet 1, ArtNet 2.
Yeah.
That's the one that people are most familiar with. And then you have ArtNet 3, and I'm not sure whether it's ArtNet 4 or if it's ArtNet 3, but it's basically streaming ACN for control and ArtNet for RDM. That's what they've based it on.
Alrighty, so I guess we're into that point where it's like if you have any last questions, drop them down in the chat. Otherwise, is anything, just while we give everyone a couple minutes to do that, is anything you guys would like to say?
Yeah, I could give a little insight into how that whole PowerMA thing could look like in the end, in the implementation.
Yeah, let's do that.
I prepared a little example for that, actually. So here we are in my code editor, which is Visual Studio Code, but it doesn't matter. And I just have had some code right up here as a little demonstration. There's a main function which is executed when you actually press the button of the plugin on the actual console, and then I try to get this value from the console for the Speedmaster. So I try to get the handle with my modified.
Are you outputting your screen to the stream?
Yeah, it just popped up on mine. Yeah.
It just has a huge delay. Yeah, but I'm online. Yes.
Cool.
So I'm just trying to get this Speedmaster handle. And I have wrote this function which name is try or catch, which actually returns if it has run okay. So then I can check if it ran okay. Then my response has to be a handle if my error checking was all right. And then I can print my handle, for example, or do something else with it. So that's the whole idea. I always know that the state is the perfect state and nothing is wrong with the output or with what the console has sent back to me. So, and when it's not the case, I can always break out of the loop, break out of the function, go end of file and say, oh, your program didn't work cause this reason. And that's basically how you then could write very clean programs that are really working every time, and you get the feedback when they don't work, and that's the idea. A little insight on how that works behind the scenes. It's basically just an array of functions which then executes the original Grandma functions and returns the error response or the handle. That's it.
Yeah, okay, so just to answer the question that was posed, what were the two programs you mentioned and catch them? So as Christoff wrote in chat, it's just great in MA's case, it's MA2 on PC and MA3D. If you just go into MA Lighting's website, you can download those. And I'm not entirely certain on the other consoles.
I know
So,
Everlight uses like a version of Capture that's
Yeah.
kind of embedded into their software, and then Chams's has their own Magic Viz.
Yeah.
ETC has their new Augment 3D now.
Yeah.
Um,
So
what else?
essentially, just
Yeah, everyone
so
uses their
essentially
own
just
thing.
search your whatever console you're looking to work on, and you'll be able to figure out what 3D visualizer they're using. So I guess we're going to be calling it, bring it to an end there. So I'd just like to thank our guests, Christoff and Elliott, for joining us today and imparting their knowledge.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Obviously, we all are in a bit of we're all in a place where we should be taking the time to help one another out. We're all stuck at home. If people are asking you questions, if you're asking people questions, do it. Continue to help out, and that's it. I guess we just want to work together now. So yeah, thanks guys for joining us. Yeah. So I guess that's
How
it.
much
Thanks,
fun did you
audience.
had create the try and catch method? I did not had any fun. Like working
I
with
can do that.
Lua at all isn't
Working with
really
Lua
that
and Visual
enjoyable.
Studio, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it was a hard path getting there that it actually works properly, but now like the boilerplate is up there and we can now use it to build a great piece of software. So that's the goal.
So yeah, so right, thanks everyone for joining in. Obviously, you've just started watching now. This will be uploaded whenever YouTube finishes processing it. And yeah, hopefully there might be some more stuff from us. Maybe you'll see us again in a year.
If the
We're not
lockdown
entirely
doesn't
certain.
end soon, we'll be back soon, hopefully.
Yeah, and hopefully next time we'll be able to bring you some more information on whatever's happening. All right, thanks for joining, everyone.
Bye.